All right, so I am about to go, hi Carly. I'm about to go pick up or trade a 5K iMac for this 2015 MacBook Pro. Now the deal isn't, the guy's probably getting a little bit better deal if we're being honest about it, but it's okay because he's giving me $100 and a keyboard and a mouse, and if I were to sell the keyboard and the mouse, I would make up the money that I'm losing by making the trade. Plus he's giving me $100, so I think it actually does work out pretty fair. Plus I've never had a good chance to use a Retina 5K iMac before, and this will be an excellent opportunity to. And this is the dog.
It's her birthday.
Happy birthday, Pace. Wow, the autofocus in this thing is so I will see you once I get to the location. All right, so we just got here to the local Chipotle Mexican grill. I'm waiting for the guy now. And the reason I wanted to make this trade was because I always rip into iMacs, and obviously I'm gonna go into this a little bit further, but I always rip into iMacs, so I figured I might as well give one a little bit of a chance and see if it can replace a laptop or be like a viable desktop solution. I'm worried about the hard drive. I believe it only has 8 GB of RAM, and I'm worried about the graphics card powering a 5K display, but we'll see. That's not the guy with the iMac.
Embarrassing.
Did you catch that video? So we just got the computer right here. You can see it, 27 inches. It is beautiful. Thunderbolt 2, all the everything that I'm expecting out of this thing. He did give me the keyboard up there and the magic mouse, which is cool. I mean, it's not the most powerful computer of all time, but the screen is really nice, and I'm interested to see how it works, but I'm sort of expecting to not totally love it. But, you know, I rip into them so much, I felt like it was only fair. How uncomfortable I look with this hunch back. What if I sat down lower like this, like I'm taking a poop? People normally have very soothing music to their B-roll, so I'm gonna do the same thing just for you guys. Alright, so I just got back from picking up the iMac. As you saw earlier, that light is super bright. Here it is. It's currently being set up, and initial impressions are that I don't like vlogging very much. Also, the hard drive on the inside is noticeable. I'm deleting some things off of this hard drive. The guy deleted pretty much everything, but I just wanted to wipe the hard drive and then put my information on it. But it's taking a little bit of time, I've noticed. I mean, there is a spinning hard drive in there on a computer from 2014. I guess I should expect more, but I guess I can't. It's Apple. What do I expect? But initial impressions are 5K screen looks really, really good. Obviously, it's quiet. The speakers sound pretty good, surprisingly good, maybe better than the Thunderbolt display, and I love the look of this keyboard. But I will play on this thing for a little bit, give you my first initial impressions, and then I'm going to do a follow-up video using this thing for like a few weeks. Then I'll give you all of my impressions on it, or maybe I'll give up halfway through because it'll suck so bad. We'll see. Alright, I'll see you in a second. I just found an RX 480 8GB graphics card. The guy wants $100 for it. He won't move on it, so unfortunately, I'm gonna have to pay $100 for it, which I think is okay because I got $100 yesterday with the computer that I traded, so it kind of balances itself out a little bit. So I'm going to go leave right now and go pick that up. Alright, so we're here now, and I got my $100 from yesterday. Essentially, the guy Apple paid me, and I pulled this out in cash. Same thing. So I'm going to take this money and purchase an RX 480. It's not a 580, and I couldn't find one for like $100, which is what I would have preferred to do, but it's the 8GB 480. And the effective speed, I think, is like a 5 to 8% decrease in performance between a 580 and a 480. So I'm not too sad about it or too broken up about it. So I'm gonna purchase this and I'll see you after I have the new card. All right, so I have my lovely fiance on camera. I just picked up the RX 480 8GB variant. It is the blower style fan, which I think looks sick, and it should work perfectly fine plugged into the eGPU. Obviously, you'll probably know if it doesn't work, but we're gonna go home now and plug it in and see if it works and see what kind of extra performance we can get out of it. See you in a minute. All right, so I have been using the iMac for the better part of about 3 days now. I edited every part of this video and I've edited a future video on it. And I'm very, very surprised at how much I actually like this thing. So as I said, I've been using it for 3 days now, but first let me go over the specs real quick to give you an idea about what I'm using. This is the first Retina iMac that they ever made, 2014 5K iMac. The screen looks nice. Obviously bezels are a little bit thick. The i5 inside is the i5 4690, which still holds its own in 2019. No, it's not a 6-core or an 8-core processor, but a quad-core processor with no hyper-threading, but still gets pretty respectable scores on Geekbench. I know it's Geekbench, but it does still get a pretty respectable number on Geekbench as it is right now, around 13,000, which in my opinion is very, very usable, especially in 2019. For a frame of reference, the old mid-2012 MacBook Pro that I was using got a very similar score on Geekbench on the CPU side with an i7 inside of it. Granted, that's a mobile processor, and this is a desktop class processor, but give and you take. Next, it has 8GB of RAM. I actually had 28GB of DDR3 1333 MHz RAM sitting around. Now, this isn't the full 1600 MHz that I could put inside of this machine, but I wanted more RAM instead of just the 8GB that they gave me. I had all these extra bits of RAM from the 2011 MacBook Pro video I made like a month ago, and I haven't sold it yet. It's actually sitting under the camera right now. So that is obviously an odd number of gigabytes inside of there. There's 3 8GB sticks and then 1 2GB stick. Obviously, you'd probably get better performance if you were to use 1600 MHz RAM and have all the RAMs match up with each other, or at least have certain RAM match up with each other. So there's that, but the performance has been really good. It does have the M290X graphics card inside of it. Not great, but as you saw, I picked up an RX 480 8GB variant, and I did have an eGPU. I know, just lying around, but I keep it for these videos because I love eGPUs, even though they're not the most cost-effective thing. I do really like eGPUs because I think the idea of it is so cool. I have that hooked up back there. You can see the iMac on the left side, and then behind that, on the right-hand side, is the 1440p display that I bought like 3 or 4 months ago. You've seen it in some of my older videos. I kept it around because I was using the Thunderbolt display, but I decided to use the eGPU and plug it into that. And the performance is pretty good on, again, Geekbench. I know, not the best thing. On their OpenCL test, I just know these numbers a little bit better. It got like 110,000. That is not great. That's about a 30% drop in performance. But when you consider the fact that that performance is substantially better than the M290X 2GB variant that is inside of the iMac right now, the results sort of speak for themselves. Editing video at full resolution, 1080p 8-bit, not the most demanding. I noticed on the 2015 and the 2012 MacBook Pro that I had been using recently that when I used 10-bit, it really choked it up, so I've just become accustomed to filming in 8-bit. And now that's not to say that it can't handle 10-bit, because with the dedicated graphics card, the RX 480 that's inside the eGPU, it does support the internal display and the external display from at least my tests anyway. I noticed on eGPU.io, they said that it wouldn't, but when I ran the Unigine Heaven benchmarks on both displays, it actually performed slightly better on the internal display. So I'm not exactly sure why that was the way that it was. Maybe, I'm not really sure. But I do know that with that desktop class graphics card that the RX 480 is, and the 8GB of VRAM, really helps edit videos a lot better than a MacBook Pro. And again, it's a desktop class computer, so better cooling, everything that you get with that. Now you have the spec rundown. Do I like this computer? So I've been ripping into iMacs for about 5-6 months, and I've always sort of had this hatred for them. I've never shown one on the channel except for like my 3rd video of all time. And if I'm being honest with you, I have really, really enjoyed my time with this iMac. Although I do have a couple of things that, not complaints, but a couple of things to talk about. So regarding this iMac behind me, I really have enjoyed it. The 5K screen looks really good. It just looks really good. My 1440p screen sitting right next to it still looks really good as well. So I don't notice a huge difference. Obviously, you could tell it looks better on the iMac because there's like effectively, if you were to cut off the ultra wide part of the ultra wide monitor, it's like 4 times the number of pixels. So it's got a lot more pixels, but that also means it requires a lot more energy to power it, which I'll get into a little bit later. Another good, along with the beautiful screen, which I've said you don't need, and I still believe you don't need, but when you have it, it looks nice. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to lie and say, oh, it looks terrible. 1080p screen looks better. No, 5K screen looks amazing. It's supposed to look amazing. Costs a bunch of money. And also the upgradable RAM. Now, I know Apple computers, you shouldn't give them an applaud for having upgradable RAM, but it's few and far between with Apple computers with easily upgradable RAM and accessible RAM. And this computer has it. DDR3 1600 megahertz RAM. That is SODIMM RAM in the laptop form factor, so the smaller DIMMs. It's pretty cheap right now. I know I got my 1333 megahertz 16 gigabyte kit. I know not the 1600 megahertz, but I didn't notice a huge drop in performance with it. I got that for like 50 or 60 bucks a few months ago. And 16 gigabytes of RAM, that's a decent amount for only 50 or 60 bucks. Again, only DDR3, but by my standards, 50 or 60 bucks is pretty cheap. And that's pretty much all the good I have to say about it. Using it has been really fun. I've enjoyed using it. Can we talk about how great Time Machine is? Nobody ever brings it up with Macs. Time Machine is the greatest thing ever. I have switched from my 2012 MacBook Pro to a 2015 MacBook Pro just to see if I like the differences with Time Machine. And then I went from the 2015 MacBook Pro to the new iMac sitting behind me. And the difference is, it's amazing. Like, just plug in a hard drive and it literally is backed up and ready to go in like half an hour. Half an hour? That's absurd. But let's talk about the negatives with the iMac. One is the SSD / hard drive that's inside of there. It's a hard drive. Yeah, they say it's a Fusion drive, but it's a hard drive nonetheless. I've noticed the speed of the hard drive, especially when I was deleting stuff off of it. It took forever a few nights ago to delete all of that data off of the hard drive because it's a spinning hard drive. It's a spinning disk drive. There are positives with that. You get more storage for a little bit cheaper, but the negatives are you get more storage that's super, super slow. I would love to be able to replace it, but that's my next thing. Upgrading this iMac is possible. You could rip off the screen, throw in an i7 4790K, and clean out the machine, reapply some thermal paste, along with switch out that hard drive for an SSD. But there are so many inherent risks with that. Obviously, the open power supply, I've said, could technically kill you. Would it? Probably not, but it technically could. Along with that, you are risking a 5K screen, which costs like $300, $400, $500, $600 just to replace. And now to some people that might not be a lot of money, but if you're buying a 2014 iMac with the Retina display, it probably is a lot of money to you. I know if I had to play that, I would be upset because that's a lot of money. Next is the internal graphics card. It's an M290X. It's a mobile graphics card that was not that great at the time, and it really isn't that great in 2019, especially powering a 5K display. A 5K display just demands so much power and so much horsepower and so much extra oomph to push those pixels that there have been a lot of complaints of the mobile graphics card inside of the 2014, even the 2015 iMacs that just can't support the 5K resolution and have it glitch. With me and using this eGPU solution, that has really fixed all those problems. But keep in mind that eGPU I bought for 150 bucks, along with the cables you need, it's another 80, so that's 230 bucks. Along with the graphics card, which was another 100. So 330 bucks just to use an eGPU. It's absurd. I bought these like 8 months ago at this point. So to me, the cost has already been sunk, so I'm not super upset about it. But to somebody who's looking at this, that's absurd, and you lose like 20 to 30% of the performance, especially when you pump it back into the display. Although I noticed it was actually better in some cases and worse in other cases. It doesn't really matter. And also the cooling isn't great. Really, I think it's more of a thermal paste problem. I was reading a lot of forums about these iMacs, and they say that if they were just to replace the thermal paste, the thermals actually go down. I didn't notice any thermal throttling, but just keep that in mind that if you are doing something super extensive for a very long period of time, it will definitely start to throttle. So should you buy one of these? Well, maybe if you get it for the right price. These are pretty expensive still in 2019. $1,000 is a pretty fair price for one of these. I'd say maybe a little bit cheaper, $900, $800, a little bit more expensive, $1,100, $1,200, depending on what upgrades are inside of there. Would I suggest totally buying it? I can't say yes, go buy it, but if you get it for the right price, and you're willing to get an eGPU, which costs a little bit of money, but keep in mind you can use that eGPU in the future because Thunderbolt 3 and soon Thunderbolt 4, which should be in the USB Type-C form factor, will be coming out. So in the future, you'll still be able to use that eGPU, which means you could save money on which laptop you buy. So instead of having to get an upgraded graphics card in your laptop, you already have the eGPU. Instead of having to get an upgraded graphics card in like the 2015 iMac or the 2017 iMac, you already have the eGPU. So eGPUs I love. I'm a big fan of them. Financially, they don't make a ton of sense. And honestly, these iMacs don't make a ton of sense either. But it's one of the best ways to get the best screen on the market, in my opinion, along with a relatively powerful Apple computer. Now, for $800, $900, and for what I put into this thing, roughly around $1,300 if you were to price everything out, you could build a gaming PC that would make this iMac cry along with a monitor, especially if you were to purchase on the used market. So obviously, there's give and take with Apple computers, but you get the beautiful 5K display, you get the hard to reach ports, and you get an overall pretty solid design. I can't decide if I want to suggest this or not, because if you get it for the right price, anything is good. But should you buy like this exact iMac? I don't know. It comes down to what you need. If you need a lot of power, i5 iMacs probably aren't what you're looking for. But if you use Final Cut Pro, an i5 iMac will probably be fine. And the support for this thing should be pretty good for a very long time, because it does have an AMD dedicated graphics card, which means it does have metal, which means that it will be supported by Apple for a little bit longer than anything with an NVIDIA-based GPU. So do keep that in mind. I'm Scott with Techno Eclipse. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you guys like the editing of this one. I had a ton of fun making this video, and I hope you guys liked it. And if you did like it, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you again for watching. Peace out.